Yeah, our study is a little bit larger. We have three kind of individual sub-studies within there. The first is examining the impact of sanitation access on psychosocial stress among girls and women across the reproductive life cycle in Odisha.
My part of study focus on menstrual hygiene practices in correlation to reproductive tract infection. The findings are wealth, education, and a private space are the key predictor for reproductive tract infection.
Hi, I'm DJ, and my study is looking about the access and practices of poor sanitation practices on pregnancy outcomes. So this is a population-based prospective cohort study where we specifically designed to capture the change of sanitation practices with course of pregnancy as well as the birth outcomes.
So I think one of the main takeaways, kind of one of the most valuable aspects of this workshop has been some time to kind of engage with the other researchers, implementers, and policymakers and kind of help translate our research into recommendations for policy, actions for these implementing organizations, and see how our findings are kind of fitting in with the larger body of research that's emerging from this recent initiative. So as far as takeaways, I think, overall, it's kind of a work in progress. We're still trying to, even within our own study, kind of make sense and find that common narrative. But I think, first and foremost is that, there really are major structural inequalities that have disadvantaged women when it comes to sanitation access, and kind of understanding the impacts and the scope of that problem has been a kind of a valuable contribution to this research.
And we have undertaken a study on sanitation and women in this area. Using mixed method approach, we capture sanitation facilities available for women and girls in this area, and their expectations about the ideal sanitation facilities and the effects of limitations they have to face in terms of stress and unmet needs.
We see is that almost 90% of women and girls in our area have access to latrines and do report using them. But there's still 10% who do not have access and practice open defecation. What the main findings are that yes, sanitation is related with stress, psychosocial stress, and the stresses are mostly lack of privacy, lack of cleanliness. Women also report they also perceive violence, though it's not in extreme terms, but in terms of mental and sexual harassment, in terms of verbal abuse. Interestingly, also what comes out is that there are certain strategies which the village council adopts, which essentially is to discourage open defecation. And a good example of that is these good morning committees, which it's a committee of school teachers and other village authorities which go around early morning with a whistle in their hand, essentially a strategy to name and shame, which in a way also compounds the psychosocial stress that these vulnerable women who do not have access to latrines are subjected to.
Good. This was an excellent meeting which we had in the last couple of days. The most important thing that has happened in this meeting, in fact, this is the first time we've seen that the researchers who have done research have talked about their research to the people, not necessarily only the policy people, but also the people who implement the work related to the research we've done. So this is the first time, the people who are at the grassroots, who are actually day-to-day implementing various activities related to WASH practices, have also listened to people like us who are into to research. That's why this meeting was extremely useful for we as researchers, and I'm sure for the policy and the implementers as well.
In our study, we were looking at women's experiences of vulnerabilities, violence, psychosocial stress they feel around sanitation.
Hi, this is Monica. In our study, we interviewed 112 women in Pune and Jaipur in different slum areas, caste, age, and class. The main findings of the research were that these variations on caste, class, religion mattered very much for how women experience psychosocial stress due to inadequate or the unavailability of sanitation. We found that public toilets and going for open defecation created many of the same risks for women. That was a surprising finding. But women face mostly the same stresses, regardless of the sites that they use for defecation. The other key finding was that most women feared for their daughter's safety more than for their own. And finally, one's position in a majority group, one's inclusion in a majority group, often reduce psychosocial stress because of this community support and community power.
One of the recommendations from the women very strongly was around public toilets because women would like to use them for the serious issue of affordability as well as maintenance. So those were really critical issues. And when we say maintenance, it actually includes water, lighting, safety, so all of these issues are articulated by the women. If we were to sort of broadly synthesize what we think would be our key recommendations in the urban context, especially for cities which are sort of typical or like Pune and Jaipur, we will try and integrate urban planning, basically sanitation plans need to be integrated as part of urban business planning, because that will also mean that governments will have to look at livelihood, space and survival issues of the people, which is very central to how psychosocial stress in fact can be lessened if these issues were addressed. I think we were all very happy with yesterday's deliberations because it was very intensive and it actually helped us revisit our findings, which were all over, which were all very important, but to bring them down to the specifics which would really inform policy in ways. Today has been nice because we've really been able to discuss methods, methodologies, our own limitations, we were able to understand. So all in all, I think today's was an interesting experience for all of us.
It's also been very good to see today the overlap among the research findings. It makes it very clear that the overarching idea behind the funding has been very strong in terms of what it has produced as results.
I'm Sweta Patnaik. I work with WaterAid in India as the policy coordinator for wash and health and nutrition. And talking about this meeting for the last 2 days, I think this is the right time for findings from these studies to come out now. Considering the environment in India relating to sanitation, there is the highest level of policy commitment as far as sanitation is concerned, with the Prime Minister launching the Swachh Bharat mission or the Clean India mission. And two things which would play a major role is that from these findings is the findings that have come out on women's health and safety related to access to sanitation and MHM practices. And the second one is wash and healthcare settings especially to do with maternity wards and labor wards. These are the times when the guidelines for the Clean India campaign or the Swachh Bharat mission is in the process of being developed, and the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and the Ministry of Women and Child Development would actually sit up and listen to the recommendations of these research and what they inform about what's happening in the ground, and they can play a key role. These findings from these four studies, to inform the way sanitation programs are designed, implemented, and monitored. And I have great hopes that this will feed into the guidelines that are being developed, which is the most important part happening right now. That it's time for people working in the water and sanitation sector, organizations and experts to collaborate and to support the government's agenda to take forward the Clean India campaign, because we have time till 2019, and that's what Government of India is targeting itself as. And if we do not take this opportunity full on, then there's a danger of losing the boat for India, and a loss for all of us working in the sector.